Hello and welcome to our 7-8 minutes of weekly Torah talk. With us today, Devorah Tucker-Fick. She's a cantorial student at Aleph. Hello and thank you for being with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You have a wonderful Parsha to discuss, Parshat Toldot. A few sentences about this Parsha. Rebecca and Isaac have twins. Esav emerges first. Jacob is born clutching Esau's heel. Esav sells his birthright, his right as a first son, to Jacob for a pot of red lentil stew. I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with the story. While Esav goes off to hunt for his father's favorite food, Rebecca dresses Yaakov in Esav's clothes and sends him to receive his father's blessings. When Esav returns and the deception is revealed, Yaakov is forced to leave home, after a while, for Haran to flee Esav's wrath. The first pasuk of the parsha says, "Ve'ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham olid et Yitzchak," and these are the generations of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. So, this is the first parsha in which we meet Yaakov, Jacob, a complicated person. Some people would say he's both a bum who sits in a tent and a conniving brother. So why do we still like him?
Well, I think first of all, we like the underdog. And in this story, he's kind of the underdog, or at least he starts out that way. We also know as we're reading it very early on that there's going to be a twist in the story. So because we already know that the elder will serve the younger. So that's already there. And I think
because that's what Rebecca is told in advance.
That's what Rebecca is told, right, while she's pregnant.
Right.
And so we know in advance that will happen. So when this trickery occurs, we kind of, I think, as human beings, we like this idea of this person who's overlooked in life, and then because of birth order or status in life or wealth or circumstance, and then they're able to overcome that and rise up. But beyond that, I think the text describes Yaakov as Ish Tam. So, and some of the translations, translated as innocent or simple. But in this story, I think we know that it isn't true that he's a simple man, because later in the story, he's anything but simple. So maybe that's not the best translation of that word. And I suspect a better translation could be something like complete or solid or upright or sound, like a sound man. So I think this is the text letting us know that before Yaakov engages in this trickery of his brother, that, hey, this is the good guy. So even if he does this thing that looks pretty bad later in the story, we just need to remember that he's the guy you're supposed to like. And Esav, on the other hand, is described as a hunter, a man of the field, and kind of like this athletic sort of man. And his father likes him better because it says that the game was in his father's mouth.
Right.
So he feeds him. And it's a really shallow, it's this love of Esav by Yitzchak that for what Esav can give him. It's a transactional relationship. So he's not loved for who he is as a person of character. And on the other hand, Yaakov is loved by Rivka for who he is, for being a person of character, we presume. And although she knows in the end what God has told her will happen, that Esav will serve Yaakov, the text doesn't specifically say that she has ever shared that with Yitzchak. And but I do think that we can presume that she has shared it with Yaakov, because they're kind of in on this scheme together. So there's this idea, I think, that he knows what is also supposed to happen.
Well, they have to cooperate when she dresses him up and sends him to his father. So they must be
right
in some consultation before this happens.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting too that Yaakov isn't concerned about this being an unethical for him to do. He's concerned about getting caught. He's not questioning what they're doing. So he's in on it. I also think, though, in that, we have to examine why would he, if he's a good person of good character, he's an Ishtam, why then would he go along with this? But I think that in looking at Esav, it's quite telling that he comes into the tent and he's so famished that from work that he's done that he's willing to take Yaakov up on this kind of absurd agreement of trading his birthright for a bowl of pottage, these red lentils.
Right.
And, pottage is like the lowest of the low of ancient foods. I mean, you put it in a pot, you just throw foods in, and you simmer it for hours or days until it breaks down and it's mush. It's like the ultimate fix it and forget it crock pot food. So, this is how much. It's not like Yaakov had this fine steak and wine and things like that. He traded him for the lowest of the low crock pot meal that you probably wouldn't even take to a potluck.
But don't you get the sense? Don't you get a sense that Yaakov is only doing it to feel better about himself when one day he's actually going to steal the blessing?
I think that's true, and I think that you later in the story we also realize that when Yaakov goes in for the blessing, and then Esav's reaction to that, I don't think that Esav ever had the intention of keeping the deal with this. He made the trade, but this also is an examination of his character, that he promised that, but along with that birthright then should come that blessing. And he still seems willing and happy to receive that blessing. But I also think too that he doesn't understand what is of worth. His word is not of worth if he never intended to keep his promise. The birthright, it says that he despised the birthright. He found contempt in it. So it was all about what he would get out of it. And everything in his life seems to be a transaction.
And yet he seems quite broken when the blessing is taken away from him. It's one of the most heartbreaking sins of the Torah in my view. I truly feel for him every year, time and again.
Yeah, it says that he weeps and then he begs for a blessing. And I look at that and I also wonder about, his marriage. It says in the Parshat that, he and his wife were like this spiritual affliction to Yitzchak and Rivka. So I can only imagine that he is also feeling very much at this point in his life like an outsider. But at the same time, we can't help but to like Yaakov because the story sets us up to like him. And so what I really think this is about is that, character matters. If we have leaders who are only in it for what they can get out of something, for power or wealth or whatever the transaction is, they don't bother to develop themselves and their character to actually lead people. And so, it is a story that's heartbreaking, and I don't want to minimize that aspect of it. But what the Torah, I think, is trying to tell us is that, while Yitzchak is it's like he's blind to the fact, he's literally blind. And I think that he's blind to the fact that his oldest son is really not fit to lead the nation. His wife knows that. His younger son knows that. God has confirmed that to her, and so Yaakov has developed himself as a person who is fit to lead the nation, and so although he's flawed, we also know he's like a person of character because the text tells us that, and he fights for what he wants, and this might also be the beginning of what allows him later on in the story to fight the angel and to become Israel, because he's had this kind of fight in his life.
Right. I could ask you 10 more questions about this parsha, but our time is up. It's a wonderful story, and you should all go read it. Thank you for coming, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to you. Have a good one.